Welcome to Introduction to Cultural Resources. This course is going to cover the common types of cultural resources, what makes an archaeological site, why the location or context of a resource is important, what laws apply to cultural resources, how to engage with the public when talking about resources, and what to do if you find a new resource. Cultural resources are items that are made, used, or modified by humans. An archaeological resource is 100 years old or older, and a historic resource is 50 years old or older. Cultural resources, there are two different types. There's artifacts, which are portable, and features that are non-portable. There is another distinction between cultural items and sites. We often refer to them as prehistoric versus historic. So prehistoric is before the introduction of writing in the area, and historic is after. Prehistoric is pre-European contact, historic is post, and prehistoric in Nevada is roughly before the 1820s, and historic is anything between about the 1820s and 50 years ago. Some examples of prehistoric resources are rock shelters, projectile points, also known as arrowheads, wickiups or other structures, grinding tools like this mano and metate, petroglyphs, and pictographs. Example historic cultural resources include stone cabins, wagons and other materials for farming and mining, historic glass bottles, and old tin cans. So what makes an archaeological site is actually the artifacts and features together. For example, this site has a rock shelter, a roasting pit for cooking food, petroglyphs, artifacts like ceramic sherds or broken pieces of pottery, and lithics, also known as stone tools or stone tool debris. At a historic site, you might find a smokestack, rock or stone cabins, charcoal kilns, and artifacts like can scatters and discarded tools or debris. What's most important about an archaeological site is its context. So the context is the location that an artifact was originally left. If you just have this arrowhead, it's a pretty cool arrowhead, but the information about the arrowhead and the story for the arrowhead is linked to the location it's found. So this arrowhead can be dated by scientists and its use determined, at least if it's hunting large game, small game, and what period of time. The other part about leaving an object in its context or connecting it to where it was located is it provides for the visitor's experience as well as the researchers, the descendants, and anybody who visits the area. Now, this historic can works the same way as the arrowhead or projectile point in that its location tells the story. By looking at the can, we can see not only what was in it, when it was manufactured, and then where it was located helps us understand who was there, what kinds of foods they were eating, and their daily habits. And just like the projectile point, when you visit a historic site and you see tin cans, it provides an experience and helps the visitor piece together what life may have been like in the past. There's value to cultural resources. Scientific, of course, archaeologists research and do studies on artifacts and archaeological sites to fill in history, but also monetary. It's illegal to collect these artifacts unless it's on your own privately owned property. So when you see sales of materials on eBay and Etsy, We got to make sure that those are actually from private lands. In most cases, they're not. So there is a monetary value to them. There's a large recreational and educational value. For example, this wading pool at Kershaw-Ryan State Park that was built by the CCC is an attraction for people to go to the park. And then you have Elgin's schoolhouse pictured where people can learn about what it was like in a one-room schoolhouse in rural Nevada. These places and objects also connect people to their culture, the place that they're located, and their identity as Nevadans, Native Americans, descendants of miners and explorers, and much more. Most visitors to archaeological sites don't cause any harm, but there are some ethics that are out there for people to follow. Leave no trace has principle number 4, which is leave what you find. And tread lightly has their own guidelines to avoid sensitive areas. Don't disturb historical, archaeological, or paleontological sites. There are also laws that protect these resources for parks and other public lands. NRS 383.435 states it is illegal to remove, damage, or destroy any historic or prehistoric site or cultural resource on state lands. The first offense is a gross misdemeanor with up to 364 days in jail. Second offense is a Class E felony with a minimum term of not less than 1 year and a maximum of 4 years. And the third and subsequent offense is a Class C felony with a minimum term of not less than 1 year and a maximum of 5 years. All offenses are required to pay restitution for the cost of restoration, stabilization, and interpretation of the site or cultural property that was damaged, removed, or destroyed. There's also another level of protection with a graves protection, which is NRS 383.180. Except as otherwise provided in NRS 383.170, a person who willfully removes without obtaining any required permit, mutilates, defaces, injures, or destroys the cairn or grave of a native Indian will have the same penalties as the NRS that I described before. But in addition, there's going to be restitution for the cost to re-enter with appropriate dignity all artifacts and human remains associated with the cairn or grave. So if you find people looting, it's a serious offense. Looters are intentionally collecting artifacts on a large scale. They can be using shovels, buckets, and screens, so it's important that you call a ranger or local law enforcement immediately. Keep an eye on the subjects from a safe distance. Looters may become hostile. Provide your location. Describe the person or persons you see and what they're doing, including their appearance, what tools they have, their vehicles, and license plate. And if the subjects begin to leave, observe the direction they leave in. So be prepared to fill out a witness statement after the fact. If rangers contact the looter, you might be asked to confirm they are the same people you saw. And the ultimate thing is do your best to be a good witness. Another issue that occurs is sometimes we have people metal detecting. And park rules and regulations states there's no metal detecting unless authorized by a park supervisor. If the visitor has a permit or permission from the park supervisor, they still cannot remove any artifacts that are 50 years old or older. Graffiti occurs, and graffiti on a historic building or marker is a felony. This includes any building over 50 years old within a state park. So it's important that you report that immediately and treat the area like a crime scene. This will help preserve evidence that rangers need to conduct their investigation. You may also come across graffiti in the vicinity of cultural resources. You need to report it to a ranger prior to cleanup, but if a ranger is not available and you need to get it cleaned off right away, take before and after pictures. There will be times that you're required to discuss cultural resources with the public. For example, somebody may come up and ask you where to see things. And it's okay to direct visitors to interpreted park resources, for example, the stone cabin. However, it's important that you do not disclose locations of non-interpretive park resources. So for example, do you know where I can see arrowheads? The park doesn't have any sites with arrowheads open for visitation. I suggest visiting our gift store or our interpretive center so you can see some that are on display. Because this may happen. When you tell one person, they tell another, and what happens is sites that aren't ready for visitation end up being damaged because management isn't prepared. The other issue you may face is discussing the removal of cultural resources. For example, a visitor may come up and say, "Hey, I collect arrowheads. Do you know where I can find some?" Best thing to do is have a positive engagement with the visitor. "I think it's great you have an interest in our history." Take a moment to educate. Visitors are not permitted to remove arrowheads or artifacts from public lands, including state parks. However, there's a good display of arrowheads at the local museum. So at the end, you want to redirect them so that they leave feeling as though their interests haven't been dismissed and they have a way to achieve their goals. So what if somebody brings you an artifact? Again, you want to thank the visitor for their interest in helping to protect the resource. And then ask them to describe where they found it. Use a map if possible, and if they have GPS coordinates, be sure to write them down. If the object was removed from a high traffic area, or a likelihood that the object will be removed by another visitor, take the object and location information to a ranger or park supervisor immediately. If the object was removed from a low traffic area, ask the visitor to stay and help a ranger return the object where it was found. If they agree to do so, contact a ranger or park supervisor immediately. And if they can't wait around or they refuse to help out, record as much location information as possible and contact a ranger or park supervisor immediately. Now, what if they refuse to let you take the artifact? What you're to do is call a ranger or local law enforcement officer immediately. Explain to the visitor it's illegal to remove artifacts from state parks, and take note of any identifying information, like if they shared their name, where they're from, their appearance, license plate. Many arguments you may run across include, "If I don't take it home, someone else will," or "If I don't take it home, it will be destroyed." Some possible responses to this concern is cultural resources are non-renewable. Once they're gone forever. Artifacts are evidence of past events, and they should remain here for all to enjoy. When you take artifacts, you are taking a piece of our history that cannot be replaced. Another common argument is, if I take it to a museum, they can put it on display for everyone to see. Unfortunately, museums are very overcrowded, and they have storage areas full of artifacts. So many people have already taken artifacts like those to the museum, and most are never displayed. Did you know it costs museums hundreds to thousands of dollars to care for just a few artifacts? Our museums do not have the funds to care for all the things we find. I was just cleaning up trash. Sometimes visitors believe they're doing a good thing by removing old cans and bottles. That's true unless they're historic. So some responses are, old trash is sometimes the only evidence we have of past people's activity. Old trash can provide dates and help us understand how people actually lived. Unfortunately, books weren't written about how people actually lived day to day, and historic trash can tell us that information. Now, what are you to do if you find artifacts or features? We have a new cultural resource card that we'd like you to fill out. The top portion asks for your name, date, a phone number to reach you, email, the nearest park, so more than likely the park that you're working at, and if you can identify that the resource is prehistoric, historic, or if you don't know. If you happen to use a GPS, we ask for the location information and the directions to the location. So even if you're not using a GPS, you can still fill out detailed directions. And this is an example. So about 5 yards north of the interpreted trail sign on the CCC. The ceramics are difficult to see and are at the base of a juniper tree. The description of the finding is important. I found 2 ceramic pieces. One looks like the top of a pot. They are both red in color and are small enough to fit into my hand. The piece that looks like the top of a pot is a little blackened. No other artifacts were found. You don't have to have the right terminology to describe your finding. It's just important that you do the best you can to describe what you found with the words that you have. Now, approximate site dimension, this is if somebody were to go back to the location, they'd know roughly how much area they should walk to look for the things that you found. So approximate site dimensions for this example is 3 feet by 3 feet, and do, if you can, take photographs. So this person took photographs, including that of an overview of the area, and then also of artifacts. And they didn't describe any large features, so there were no photos of that. So you're going to submit your report and your photos to your supervisor as soon as you can. In this training, we have covered what is a cultural resource and the different types, why it is preferred to preserve cultural resources in context, knowledge of the laws and their penalties, how to engage with the public, and how to report new findings. So thank you. You have taken the first steps to preserving Nevada's cultural resources by completing this training. The training was created and narrated by Rayette Martin with the Nevada Site Stewardship Program in coordination with Nevada State Parks, the State Historic Preservation Office, and the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. Funding for the development of this training was provided by a grant from the Lincoln County Archaeological Initiative with funds obtained through the sale of public lands administered by the Bureau of Land Management in Lincoln County, Nevada, and approved under an interagency partnership authorized by the Lincoln County Land Act.